No babysitter could handle the Dragon Prince's tantrums until a human janitor made him laugh. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Across the vast Draconian Empire, stretching through 7 star systems, no challenge was more feared than being assigned to Prince Kaiser's royal chambers. The young heir to the imperial throne had reduced even the most stoic warriors to tears. Jack Sullivan never meant to become the only being capable of handling the most feared royal offspring in the galaxy. He was just a janitor who needed the credits. The gleaming spires of the Imperial Palace on Draken Prime pierced the amber sky like talons reaching for the twin suns. Inside those spires, chaos reigned in the royal quarters as another caretaker fled the chambers of 6-year-old Prince Kaiser, heir to the Draconian Empire. "That's the 4th one this week," High Counselor Verax muttered, his scaled brow furrowing as he watched the Zentari caretaker, a species known for their patience and emotional fortitude, run sobbing down the corridor. Smoke trailed from her singed uniform. 16 this month, actually, corrected Royal Coordinator Leora, consulting her datapad. Her long neck swiveled toward her superior, yellow eyes blinking with concern. "We've exhausted our list of qualified caretakers from all 27 allied species. The prince has special requirements." Verax snorted, a plume of blue flame escaping his nostrils. "Special requirements?" The young terror set Ambassador Krell's ceremonial headdress on fire during the Galactic Summit. "He's becoming a diplomatic incident." The sound of something expensive shattering echoed from behind the ornate doors of the royal chambers, followed by a high-pitched roar that made the palace guards wince. The temperature in the hallway rose several degrees. "Emperor Zorn will return from the Outer Rim campaign in just 2 weeks," Leora reminded him. "He expected us to have the prince's behavioral challenges addressed by then." "The Emperor believes his son simply needs discipline," Verax said, lowering his voice. "He doesn't understand that no one can get close enough to the boy to establish boundaries. Not when he can breathe fire at will and has scales impervious to most forms of restraint." Leora's frills flattened against her neck in a gesture of defeat. "Perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong direction. The traditional caretakers have all failed. Maybe we need someone unconventional." "What do you suggest?" "A combat droid?" Verax asked, only half joking. "No," Leora said slowly, her eyes brightening with sudden inspiration. "Someone the prince would never expect. Someone so far beneath his notice that he might actually be curious rather than immediately hostile." Verax followed her gaze down the corridor where a human male in gray coveralls was mopping the polished floor, completely oblivious to the crisis unfolding around him. "You can't be serious," Verax said. "A human? They're barely a Class 3 civilization. The prince would incinerate him in seconds." "Exactly why it might work," Leora replied. "The prince is accustomed to trained professionals trying to control him. What would he make of someone who isn't trying to discipline him at all? Besides, humans are one of the few species with known natural defenses that somehow survived on a planet filled with predators. They must have some adaptive qualities we're overlooking." Verax flicked his tail in contemplation. "The human would need hazard pay and medical coverage. Extensive medical coverage. Considering what we're paying the specialized caretakers, a human janitor would actually save the royal treasury considerable expense," Leora pointed out. "Even with hazard pay." Another crash from the royal chambers, followed by what sounded like furniture being reduced to splinters, made their decision urgent. "Very well," Verax conceded. "But when the Emperor asks why his son is being tended to by a maintenance worker, you'll be explaining the decision." Leora bowed her head in acknowledgement before approaching the human janitor, who was now wringing out his mop in a bucket of iridescent cleaning solution. "Excuse me," she began, towering over him. "What is your designation?" The human looked up, seemingly unfazed by addressing a high-ranking Draconian official while on his knees. Jack Sullivan. I'm with Central Maintenance, Level 3. How would you feel about a special assignment, Jack Sullivan? One that comes with a substantial increase in your compensation." Jack stood, wiping his hands on his coveralls. Lady, I've been cleaning up after your people for 3 years now. Whatever you need cleaned up, I've probably seen worse. Leora's lips curled in what passed for a draconian smile. I sincerely doubt that. 20 minutes later, after signing numerous liability waivers and being fitted with a minimal thermal protection suit, Jack stood outside the prince's chambers, armed with only his cleaning cart and a bemused expression. Just to be clear, he said to Leora, you want me to go in there and, what exactly? Clean the royal chambers as you normally would, she instructed. Do not address the prince directly unless spoken to. Do not attempt to discipline him or contradict him in any way. Simply perform your duties. And try not to be set on fire, Verax added dryly. Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. Right. Just another day at the office. The massive doors slid open, revealing what looked like the aftermath of a localized hurricane. Furniture was overturned, tapestries hung in tatters, and smoldering piles of what might have once been toys littered the floor. In the center of the destruction stood a small figure, no taller than Jack's waist. Prince Kaiser of the Draconian Empire was not what Jack had expected. Yes, he had the characteristic scaled skin of his species, small horns protruding from his forehead, and a tail that lashed behind him like an angry whip. But his eyes, large and golden with vertical pupils, held something Jack recognized immediately: loneliness. The prince's chambers were vast, designed for a growing draconian who would eventually reach 3 times Jack's height. For now, they only emphasized how small the child was, swimming in a space too big for him. The prince puffed his chest, smoke curling from his nostrils. Who are you? Where's caretaker Zalia? Did she quit too? His voice was high and imperious, but with a tremor that betrayed his age. Jack pushed his cart further into the room, pretending to notice the prince only as an afterthought. Don't know any Zalia. I'm just here to clean up. He began methodically picking up debris, sorting items into his cart with practiced efficiency. Prince Kaiser blinked in surprise. You're not scared of me? Should I be? Jack asked mildly, continuing to work. I've got a job to do. Unless you're planning to stop me. The prince seemed taken aback by this response. He scampered closer, his claws clicking on the marble floor. I could breathe fire on you, he threatened, though his tone lacked conviction. That would make my job harder, not impossible, Jack replied, unruffled. He knelt to collect the remains of what appeared to be a priceless vase. Though I'd appreciate it if you didn't. Paperwork's a nightmare when there's a workplace injury. The prince circled Jack curiously, tail swishing. You're a human, he stated, sniffing the air. I've never met a human before. Well, now you have. Jack extended a hand. Jack Sullivan, maintenance. The prince stared at the offered hand, then tentatively extended his own clawed appendage. Jack shook it firmly but gently, as though this were a perfectly normal diplomatic exchange and not a potentially life-threatening encounter. I am Prince Kaiser III, heir to the Draconian throne, flame of the 7 systems, terror of. That's quite a name, Jack interrupted. Do your friends call you Kai for short? The prince's frills flattened in confusion. I don't have friends. Ah, Jack said, returning to his cleaning. That explains the mess. Bored, huh? Before the prince could respond, Jack pulled a small device from his pocket and tossed it to him. The prince caught it reflexively. What is this primitive technology? Kaiser asked, turning the object over in his claws. It's a yo-yo, Jack explained. Human toy. Nothing fancy, but it passes the time. The prince examined it suspiciously, then tentatively let the yo-yo drop, watching in surprise as it rolled back up the string to his hand. His eyes widened. It responds to gravity differentials, he exclaimed. Sure, kid. Whatever you say, Jack agreed, hiding a smile as he continued collecting broken items. For the next hour, Jack cleaned methodically while Prince Kaiser practiced with the yo-yo, occasionally asking questions about Earth and human customs. Jack answered candidly, neither pandering to the prince nor treating him with the fearful deference he was accustomed to. As Jack prepared to leave, having restored some semblance of order to the chambers, the prince stood in his path. You will return tomorrow, he commanded, though there was a question in his eyes. Jack glanced at his watch. My shift starts at 0700. I can swing by before I hit the north wing. The prince nodded solemnly. See that you do? I may have more questions about human customs. Sure thing, Your Highness, Jack said with a casual salute. Outside, Leora and Verax waited with barely concealed astonishment. He's still alive, Verax murmured. And the chambers are cleaner. How did you manage it? Leora asked Jack. What's your technique? Jack shrugged, pushing his cart toward the service elevator. No technique. I just treated him like a person, not a problem. The following morning, Jack arrived at the prince's chambers as promised. This time, the room was noticeably less chaotic, though still far from tidy. You're 4 minutes late, the prince announced from where he sat cross-legged on a floating cushion, the yo-yo dancing at the end of its string. Traffic was murder in the service tunnels, Jack replied, setting up his cleaning supplies. Royal procession from the Ark tourist delegation. The prince's frills perked up. Did they bring the crystalline birds? Father never lets me attend the formal welcomings. 3 cages full, Jack confirmed. Pretty things. Nightmare to clean up after, though. Their droppings burned through standard-issue mop heads. Kaiser giggled, an unexpected sound that seemed to surprise even him. He quickly composed his features back into regal haughtiness, but not before Jack caught the moment of genuine amusement. I require entertainment, the prince declared. Tell me a human story while you work. Jack considered this as he began organizing a shelf of what appeared to be priceless artifacts from conquered worlds. Ever hear about the time humans first went to our moon? The prince hadn't, and listened with rapt attention as Jack described how humans had reached their nearest celestial neighbor with technology that, by draconian standards, was barely more advanced than strapping oneself to an explosive and hoping for the best. That can't be true, the prince insisted. No species would be so reckless. Look it up in your fancy royal database, Jack challenged. Humans are notorious for doing incredibly stupid things just to see if they can. This pattern continued for days, then weeks. Each morning, Jack would spend an hour in the prince's chambers, cleaning and sharing stories of Earth, its history, mythology, and cultural oddities. The prince, in turn, gradually revealed details about his own life, his distant father, the pressure of royal expectations, his frustration at being confined to the palace while the emperor conducted campaigns across the galaxy. Jack learned that the prince's mother had died when he was just 2, leaving him in the care of a rotating staff who feared his tantrums, which, Jack noted, had mysteriously ceased since their arrangement began. Why aren't you afraid of me? Kaiser asked one morning as Jack repaired a lighting fixture. Everyone else is. Jack considered the question seriously. Well, I guess because I've got nothing to lose. The professionals you scared off? Their whole careers depended on handling you right. Me? I'm just a janitor. If you roast me, they'll find another guy with a mop. I wouldn't roast you, Kaiser said quietly. Appreciate that, buddy, Jack replied with a wink. As the date of the emperor's return drew near, palace officials noticed the remarkable change in the young prince. He attended his lessons without complaint, ate his meals without incinerating the serving staff, and even agreed to participate in ceremonial duties that previously would have ended in disaster. It's extraordinary, Leora remarked to Verax as they observed Jack and the prince engaged in a game involving a ball and cups Jack had fashioned from maintenance supplies. The human has accomplished in weeks what specialists couldn't do in years. The emperor won't like it, Verax cautioned. A royal heir, forming an attachment to a human maintenance worker? It violates every protocol. Results speak for themselves, Leora countered. For the first time, the prince is happy. The morning of the emperor's scheduled return, Jack arrived at the prince's chambers to find Kaiser pacing anxiously, his tail lashing and small puffs of smoke escaping his nostrils. Whoa, what's with the fire hazard routine? Jack asked, setting down his cart. Father returns today, Kaiser said, his voice tight. He'll want to see my progress. The tutors will report that I've improved, but what? Jack prompted when the prince fell silent. But it won't be enough, Kaiser whispered. It's never enough. Jack abandoned any pretense of cleaning and sat on the floor, patting the space beside him. After a moment's hesitation, the prince joined him. "Tell me about your dad," Jack said. Kaiser's frills flattened. "Emperor Zorn the Unyielding, conqueror of the Seven Systems, is not someone you simply tell about." "Try me," Jack encouraged. The prince stared at his clawed hands. "He's the greatest warrior our empire has ever known. He expects me to be the same. But I'm not. I don't. You don't want to conquer stuff?" "I don't know how to make him proud," Kaiser admitted. "Nothing I do is ever right. I'm not fierce enough, not cunning enough, not draconian enough." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds familiar. My old man was a career military guy back on Earth. 3 tours in combat zones before I was even 10. Nothing I did ever measured up either." "What did you do?" Kaiser asked, his golden eyes wide. "Eventually, I stopped trying to be him and figured out who I was instead." Jack shrugged. "Turns out I'm pretty good at fixing things, cleaning up messes, and apparently, hanging out with dragon princes." Kaiser managed a small smile, but it faded quickly. "Father doesn't want me to be myself. He wants a proper heir. Maybe he just doesn't know who you really are," Jack suggested. "Hard to show someone your best self when you're busy throwing tantrums and setting stuff on fire." The prince had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. That was a phase. A phase that had the entire palace diplomatic corps hiding under their desks, Jack teased, gently nudging the prince with his elbow. Kaiser laughed, a full, genuine laugh that echoed around the chamber. "Did you know Ambassador Krell's headdress was actually inflammable? It was an accident, mostly. I spent 3 days getting the scorch marks off the ceiling." Jack groaned, but he was smiling. Their moment of camaraderie was interrupted by a palace-wide announcement. The Emperor's vessel had entered the atmosphere. Arrival at the palace was imminent. Kaiser jumped to his feet, his brief happiness evaporating. "I have to prepare. I need to look perfect. The ceremonial armor." "Hey," Jack said, standing and placing a steady hand on the prince's shoulder. "You've got this. Just be yourself, the kid I've gotten to know. Not the fire-breathing terror, and not whatever perfect prince you think your dad wants." Kaiser nodded, though he looked unconvinced. "Tell you what," Jack said, reaching into his pocket. "Take this for luck." He pressed the yo-yo into the prince's hand. "And remember, if things get tough." A commotion in the corridor cut him off. The doors to the royal chambers slid open, and a phalanx of heavily armed draconian guards entered, followed by Royal Coordinator Leora. "The Emperor commands the immediate presence of Prince Kaiser in the Great Hall," she announced, her tone formal, but her eyes apologetic as they briefly met Jack's. "I'll come with you," Jack offered, but a guard stepped between them. "The human will return to his regular duties," the guard stated firmly. "By order of Emperor Zorn." Kaiser's frills flattened in distress. He looked from the guards to Jack, panic evident in his eyes. "It's okay," Jack assured him quietly. "Remember what we talked about. Just be yourself." The prince squared his small shoulders and nodded, tucking the yo-yo into his ceremonial robes. As the guards escorted him from the room, he looked back once at Jack, who gave him an encouraging thumbs up. When they were gone, Leora lingered, her expression troubled. "Level with me," Jack said. "Is the kid in trouble?" "Not trouble, precisely," Leora replied carefully. "But the Emperor has expectations. He was displeased to learn of your involvement with the prince's care. Let me guess, not dignified enough for royal standards?" Leora's silence was answer enough. "Look," Jack pressed, "that kid doesn't need more warriors and diplomats telling him how to be a proper draconian. He needs someone who sees him for who he is." "And who is he, in your estimation?" Leora asked, genuinely curious. Jack thought of the past weeks, the prince's quick mind, his wry observations, his hidden compassion. He's a kid who's desperate to connect, to be valued for himself and not his title. And yeah, he's got a temper, but show me a 6-year-old who doesn't. "The Emperor has different priorities," Leora said, her tone regretful. "You've been reassigned to the outer maintenance quadrant, effective immediately." Jack's jaw tightened. "And if I refuse? Then your employment with the Imperial Palace will be terminated. Permanently." Jack knew what permanently meant in the Draconian Empire. He nodded curtly, gathering his cleaning supplies. For what it's worth, Leora added softly, I believe you're right about the prince. And I am sorry. In the great hall, Prince Kaiser stood rigidly before the imperial throne, surrounded by the full court of draconian nobility. The vast chamber, with its soaring ceilings and walls adorned with the trophies of conquered worlds, had never felt more intimidating. Emperor Zorn towered on his throne, his massive form draped in battle-scarred armor and the royal regalia of his line. His golden eyes, so like his son's, were cold and evaluating as they took in the small figure before him. Prince Kaiser. The emperor's voice rumbled through the hall, silencing all murmurs. I have received reports of your behavior during my absence. It seems you have finally begun to show some discipline. Yes, father, Kaiser replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Yet I also hear disturbing accounts of you consorting with a human servant. The emperor continued, disapproval evident. Explain yourself. Kaiser's claws tightened around the yo-yo in his pocket. He thought of Jack's words, of being himself. Taking a deep breath, he raised his eyes to meet his father's gaze. The human taught me things no tutor could, he said clearly. About different perspectives, about finding strength in unexpected places. About laughter. A murmur ran through the court. The emperor's frills flattened against his neck, a sign of displeasure. Laughter, he growled. I send you the finest military strategists, the most accomplished diplomats, and you speak to me of laughter? Kaiser felt a familiar heat rising in his chest, the precursor to the tantrums that had once been his only means of expression. But now, he channeled that energy differently. Yes, father. Laughter, he replied, drawing the yo-yo from his pocket. And this. Before the astonished court, the young prince demonstrated the simple human toy, executing a perfect around-the-world maneuver that Jack had taught him. The yo-yo spun in a graceful arc before returning to his hand. This primitive trinket requires precise control, timing, and patience, Kaiser explained. The same qualities needed for combat and diplomacy, but learned through play rather than punishment. The emperor leaned forward, his expression unreadable. And the human taught you this. Jack taught me that there are many paths to the same destination, Kaiser said. He showed me that I can be strong without being feared, respected without being terrifying. A draconian prince, taking lessons from a species that barely mastered space travel? The emperor's voice was dangerously quiet. Kaiser felt his courage wavering, but then remembered Jack's steady presence, his unwavering belief. With a sudden clarity, the prince realized what he needed to do. He stepped forward, his small form dwarfed by the grandeur around him, but his voice rang clear through the great hall. Father, I challenge you to a demonstration. The court gasped collectively. Challenges were sacred in draconian culture. None could be refused without loss of honor, not even from a child to a parent. The emperor's eyes narrowed. Name your terms, Prince Kaiser. If I can make you laugh, truly laugh, using only what the human has taught me, then Jack Sullivan remains as my personal advisor, Kaiser declared. If I fail, I will dismiss him and accept whatever tutor you choose, without complaint or tantrum, for the rest of my education. Emperor Zorn studied his son with new interest. A bold challenge, my heir. Very well, I accept. Proceed. Kaiser took a deep breath, tucked away the yo-yo, and began to tell his father about humans, their absurd history, their improbable survival, their peculiar customs, all in the dry, slightly bewildered tone that Jack often used when describing his own species. He recounted Jack's stories about human children putting teeth under pillows in exchange for currency, about grown humans dressing in costumes to frighten each other once a year, about humans believing that breaking a mirror would bring 7 years of misfortune. As the prince spoke, something remarkable happened. The emperor's stern expression began to crack. A twitch at the corner of his mouth, a slight widening of his eyes, and then, to the astonishment of the entire court, a deep, rumbling chuckle that grew into a full-throated laugh. They truly believe stepping on cracks in their walking surfaces will harm their maternal relatives? The Emperor wheezed between bouts of laughter. What possible evolutionary advantage could such a superstition provide? Jack says it's just a game children play, Kaiser explained, grinning now. Like how I used to believe that if I held my breath long enough during space jumps, I could influence which stars we passed. The Emperor's laughter subsided into a thoughtful expression. He studied his son with new eyes. You've changed, my heir. There is a clarity to you that was missing before. Jack helped me find it, Kaiser said simply. He listened when everyone else was too afraid to get close. He saw me, not just the prince. Emperor Zorn was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving from his son to the assembled court and back again. Then he rose to his full, intimidating height. I have traveled the far reaches of our empire, he announced, subjugating worlds, commanding armies, negotiating treaties. Yet it seems that in my absence, the greatest diplomatic victory may have occurred right here, through the unlikely alliance of my heir and a human janitor. He descended from the throne and knelt before his son, bringing their eyes level, an unprecedented gesture that sent another shock wave through the court. You have won your challenge fairly, Prince Kaiser, the Emperor acknowledged. The human may remain as your advisor. And perhaps, his voice softened slightly, he might have wisdom to share with an emperor as well. In a maintenance corridor at the farthest edge of the palace complex, Jack Sullivan was half-heartedly mopping a floor that hadn't seen traffic in decades when his comm unit buzzed. Sullivan, he answered, expecting orders for some unpleasant cleaning task. The Emperor commands your immediate presence in the Great Hall, came Leora's voice, and Jack was startled to hear what sounded like suppressed excitement in her typically formal tone. Is the kid okay? He asked, instantly concerned. The prince is well, Leora assured him. More than well, in fact. But you should hurry. 30 minutes later, having navigated the labyrinthine palace and been subjected to a hasty grooming by flustered protocol droids, Jack stood before the imperial throne, trying not to fidget under the collective gaze of the draconian court. Emperor Zorn was every bit as imposing as Jack had imagined, a mountain of scaled muscle and ancient power, his eyes holding the wisdom and ruthlessness of centuries. Beside him, looking impossibly small but remarkably composed, stood Prince Kaiser. When the prince spotted Jack, his face split into a wide, fanged grin, his frills rising in what Jack now recognized as happiness. Jack Sullivan of Earth. The Emperor's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. My son has told me much about you and your unconventional methods. Jack swallowed hard. All good things, I hope, Your Majesty. He claims you have taught him more in weeks than his tutors managed in years, the Emperor continued. That you showed him strength through gentleness, discipline through play, and wisdom through simple human toys. I just treated him like a regular kid, sir, Jack said honestly. Beneath all the royal titles, that's what he is. The Emperor studied Jack with ancient, calculating eyes. A novel perspective, indeed, and one that has produced unexpected results. He gestured to Prince Kaiser, who stepped forward, head held high, confidence evident in every movement. It was a stark contrast to the angry, isolated child Jack had first encountered. My son has won the right to keep you as his advisor through a challenge fairly met, the Emperor announced. I honor his victory and extend to you an official position within the royal household. Jack blinked in surprise. I'm honored, Your Majesty, but I'm just a janitor. I don't know anything about being a royal advisor. Precisely why you are suited for the role, the Emperor replied, with what might have been the ghost of a smile. You see what others do not. You find solutions where others see only problems. And you make me laugh, Prince Kaiser added, his eyes bright. Jack looked between father and son, seeing the tentative connection forming between them, a bridge he had somehow helped to build. Well, he said finally, with a slight bow, I've always believed that a clean space leads to a clear mind. If I can help keep things running smoothly around here, I'm your man. 6 months into Jack's official appointment as royal human advisor to Prince Kaiser, the palace had settled into a new rhythm. Jack still carried his cleaning supplies everywhere, partly out of habit, partly because he found that the simple act of tidying often created the perfect environment for conversation. You don't need to do that yourself, you know. Prince Kaiser pointed out as he watched Jack scrub a stubborn stain from the training room floor. You could command an entire cleaning battalion now, and miss out on all this quality floor time. Jack replied, sitting back on his heels with a grin. Besides, best thinking happens with your hands busy and your mind free. The prince nodded sagely, as though Jack had imparted profound wisdom rather than an excuse to keep doing what he was comfortable with. At nearly 7 years old now, Kaiser had grown noticeably, both physically and in his confidence. His scales had deepened to a richer blue, his horns had extended another inch, and he carried himself with a poise that no longer seemed forced. Father wants me to join the diplomatic mission to the Helix Confederation next month, Kaiser said, absently practicing yo-yo tricks that had grown increasingly complex. He says it's time I represented the Empire beyond our borders. Jack whistled low. That's a big step. How do you feel about it? The prince considered the question seriously, as he had learned to do with Jack's inquiries. Nervous, he admitted finally. The Helix species communicate partially through color changes. What if I miss important signals? What if I cause offense? Sounds like a perfect opportunity to practice what we've been talking about, Jack suggested. Cultural curiosity, right? Ask questions instead of assuming. Kaiser's frills perked up, like when you asked about our molting rituals instead of pretending to know already. Exactly, Jack said with a laugh. Though I could have gone my whole life without knowing about the scale-shedding mucus. It's a perfectly natural bodily function. The prince sniffed, though his eyes danced with amusement. Their easy banter was interrupted by the arrival of High Counselor Verax, who now regarded Jack with grudging respect rather than the barely concealed disdain of their early encounters. The Emperor requests your presence, Sullivan, Verax announced formally. Both of you, he added with a nod to the prince. Jack exchanged a curious look with Kaiser as they followed Verax through the palace's grand corridors. Royal summons outside their regular meetings were unusual, especially with the Emperor in the midst of planning the Helix diplomatic mission. They found Emperor Zorn in his private study, a vast chamber lined with ancient texts and holographic maps of the 7 systems. The Emperor was engaged in conversation with a small group of officials Jack didn't recognize, their uniforms marking them as members of Imperial intelligence. Ah, excellent timing, the Emperor said, dismissing the officials with a wave of his massive clawed hand. Kaiser, Sullivan, we have a situation that requires your unique perspective. Jack tried not to show his surprise. In the months since his appointment, he had advised the prince on many matters, but the Emperor had never directly sought his input on Imperial business. We've received a distress signal from an unregistered vessel in the Vega Quadrant, Zorn explained, activating a holographic display that showed a small ship drifting near the outer boundary of Draconian space. Its design is unfamiliar to our databanks, but preliminary scans indicate it may be of human origin. Jack leaned forward, studying the hologram with sudden intensity. That's impossible. Earth doesn't have ships capable of reaching the Vega Quadrant. We barely made it to Mars with our current technology. Yet the evidence suggests otherwise, the Emperor countered. The vessel's hull composition matches materials common to Earth, and the distress signal, while garbled, contains phonetic patterns consistent with human languages. Can I hear it? Jack asked. The Emperor nodded to an aide, who activated an audio transmission. The sound that filled the chamber was indeed distorted, but Jack recognized snippets of what might be English, interspersed with bursts of static. Require immediate assist, crackled through the static. Engines failing, survivors, expedition. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. That's definitely English. But I don't understand how they got out there. Unless, he paused, a sudden thought occurring to him. How old is the signal? Could it be decades, maybe centuries old? The Emperor shook his massive head. The transmission is live, less than 12 hours old. And there's more. He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on the vessel. Life support is failing. Without intervention, any survivors aboard will perish within 48 hours. Jack's mind raced. We need to help them. The vessel is in contested space, Verax pointed out. The Krell Dominion would view a draconian rescue mission as a territorial incursion, possibly an act of war. So we're going to let them die because of politics? Jack demanded, forgetting for a moment who he was addressing. The Emperor regarded him with those ancient, calculating eyes. What would you suggest, Sullivan? How would humans handle such a situation? Jack took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. On Earth, maritime law dictates that any vessel must respond to a distress call if they can do so without endangering themselves. We put lives above politics. A noble sentiment, the Emperor mused, but one that assumes all parties share the same values. The Krell view weakness as an invitation to conquest. Then don't make it about weakness. Prince Kaiser spoke up suddenly. All eyes turned to the young heir. Make it about strength. The Emperor's frills raised in interest. Explain, my son. Kaiser stepped forward confidently. Humans are an emerging species with potential allies throughout the galaxy. By rescuing them, we demonstrate draconian power and benevolence simultaneously. The Krell want others to fear them. Let's show the galaxy why they should respect us instead. Jack couldn't help the surge of pride he felt as he watched the prince apply diplomatic thinking to a real crisis. The Emperor and Verax exchanged thoughtful looks. There is wisdom in your approach, Zorn acknowledged, but it would require delicate execution. Then let me go, Kaiser said, his voice steady despite the audacity of his request. With Jack, a small vessel could reach the humans quickly without appearing as a military threat to the Krell. Out of the question, Verax objected immediately. The heir to the Empire on a dangerous rescue mission in contested space? Unthinkable. Actually, the Emperor said slowly, it has interesting potential. A royal mission of mercy, led by my heir, demonstrating our commitment to interspecies cooperation. His gaze shifted to Jack, and with our resident human expert to facilitate first contact with his own kind. Jack felt a flutter of both excitement and apprehension. I'm not exactly trained for space rescue operations. You adapted to life in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor pointed out. Few humans can claim the same. Please, Jack, Kaiser said quietly. They're your people. Looking into those earnest golden eyes, Jack realized he couldn't refuse. He nodded. When do we leave? The answer, it turned out, was immediately. Within hours, Jack found himself aboard the Ember's Wing, a sleek draconian scout vessel designed for speed and stealth. Despite its relatively small size, the ship still dwarfed anything in Earth's space fleet. Preparing for departure, announced Captain Thorne, an experienced draconian officer chosen personally by the Emperor to command the mission. Her scales were a deep crimson, marking her as a rare fire breather even by draconian standards. Royal Advisor Sullivan, you might want to secure yourself. Human physiology does not typically respond well to quantum jumps. Thanks for the warning, Jack muttered, strapping himself into a seat that had been hastily modified to accommodate human dimensions. Beside him, Prince Kaiser vibrated with barely contained excitement. First official mission, the prince whispered. Are you nervous? Jack gave him a wry smile. About jumping through space-time in an alien vessel to rescue humans who shouldn't exist this far from Earth? Nah, just another Tuesday. Kaiser giggled, a sound that still surprised Jack every time he heard it. For all the prince's growing maturity, moments of pure childish delight still broke through. The Ember's Wing departed with little ceremony, slipping away from Draken Prime without the usual pomp that accompanied royal journeys. As they cleared the atmosphere, Captain Thorne activated the quantum drive, and reality seemed to fold around them. Jack had experienced space travel before. The journey to take his job at the Draconian Palace had involved a series of increasingly uncomfortable commercial transports. But nothing had prepared him for the sensation of a quantum jump. It felt as though his very atoms were being gently pulled apart, examined, and reassembled slightly out of alignment. You're turning an interesting shade of green, Kaiser observed with clinical fascination. Thanks for the update, Jack managed through gritted teeth. The jump lasted only moments before the ship smoothly transitioned back to normal space. The view screen showed the starry void of the Vega Quadrant, and there, drifting silently against the backdrop of distant suns, was the human vessel. Now that he could see it clearly, Jack was even more confused. The ship's design was unlike anything in Earth's known space program, more advanced, yet somehow utilitarian in a way that struck him as distinctly human. "Life signs," Captain Thorne demanded. "Confirmed," replied a sensor officer. "Multiple humanoid signatures, but they're weak and erratic. Life support systems are at 17% capacity and declining." "Open a channel," the captain ordered. "All frequencies." Jack stepped forward. "This is Jack Sullivan, human advisor to the Draconian Empire. We've received your distress call and are here to assist. Please respond." Seconds ticked by with no response. Jack was about to try again when a crackle of static preceded a weak voice. "This is Dr. Elena Reyes of the research vessel Pathfinder. Thank God you've come. We thought we were dead. We're preparing to dock and evacuate your crew," Captain Thorne announced. "How many survivors?" 12, came the response. "Out of 23 original crew. We've been adrift for weeks after our propulsion system failed." Jack frowned. Something about this didn't add up, but the immediate crisis took precedence over his questions. He turned to Kaiser, who was watching the proceedings with rapt attention. "Remember what we talked about for first meetings?" Jack prompted. The prince nodded solemnly. "No fire breathing unless absolutely necessary, maintain appropriate distance for human comfort levels, and avoid comments about their soft skin and lack of scales." "Perfect," Jack confirmed with a smile. The docking procedure went smoothly, the draconian technology easily adapting to the unfamiliar human vessel. Jack accompanied the rescue team, with Prince Kaiser staying close behind him despite Captain Thorne's obvious discomfort at having the royal heir in potential danger. They found the human survivors gathered in what appeared to be the ship's main command center, having consolidated their remaining power to maintain life support in a single area. The humans looked exhausted, their faces gaunt from weeks of rationed supplies, but their eyes widened with shock at the sight of their rescuers. "You're Draconian," Dr. Reyes said, staring at Kaiser and the other scaled crew members. Then her gaze landed on Jack. "And you're human. How is this possible?" "I was about to ask you the same question," Jack replied. "Earth doesn't have ships capable of reaching this quadrant." A man stepped forward, tall, with military bearing despite his obvious exhaustion. "Commander James Ward, Earth Expansion Initiative." He extended a hand, which Jack shook automatically even as his mind reeled at the unfamiliar organization name. "Earth Expansion, what now?" Jack asked. "Look, I left Earth 3 years ago to work in the Draconian Empire, and we definitely didn't have any space program called that." Ward and Reyes exchanged a look that set alarm bells ringing in Jack's head. "What year did you leave Earth, Mr. Sullivan?" Reyes asked carefully. 2087, Jack answered. "Why?" The survivors' expressions shifted to a mix of shock and sudden understanding. "Mr. Sullivan," Ward said gently, "on Earth, it's currently 2157. You've been missing for 70 years. The revelation hit Jack like a physical blow. He staggered slightly and felt Kaiser's small clawed hand steady him. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Time dilation," Reyes explained. "It's one of the phenomena we've been studying. Different regions of space experience temporal flow at varying rates. The Draconian Empire exists in a sector where time passes much more slowly relative to Earth." Jack's mind struggled to process this information. His parents, his friends, his life back on Earth, all gone, decades past. He'd been declared missing, probably dead, while he'd been cleaning palace floors and teaching a dragon prince to yo-yo. "Jack!" Kaiser's voice pulled him back to the present crisis. The prince's eyes were wide with concern. "Are you okay?" Jack took a deep breath. "I will be. But right now, we need to get these people to safety." The evacuation proceeded efficiently, with the Draconian medical team providing immediate care to the weakest survivors. As they worked, Jack pulled Ward aside. "Level with me, Commander. What's the Earth Expansion Initiative really doing out here? This is way beyond any normal exploration mission. Ward hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. After first contact with the Zentari 30 years ago, Earth learned we weren't alone in the galaxy. Some factions wanted to proceed cautiously, establish diplomatic relations. Others feared that alien civilizations might pose existential threats to humanity. Let me guess, Jack said dryly. Your group took the paranoid approach. The pragmatic approach, Ward corrected. The initiative was formed to establish human outposts in strategic locations throughout near space, ensuring humanity wouldn't be confined to a single planet or system if relations with alien species soured. So you're what? An advanced military operation. Research and reconnaissance, Ward insisted. The Pathfinder wasn't armed beyond basic defense systems. We were mapping the edge of draconian space when our engines malfunctioned. Jack studied the man's face, looking for deception. And what were you planning to do with that information? Before Ward could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Captain Thorne's voice came over the comm system. Multiple vessels approaching at high speed. Krell signatures confirmed. Perfect timing, Jack muttered. He turned to Ward. Looks like your reconnaissance mission just got more complicated. Back on the bridge, the view screen showed 3 Krell warships on an intercept course, their distinctive barbed hulls gleaming menacingly in the starlight. They're hailing us, reported the communications officer. On screen, Captain Thorne commanded, her frills rising in threat display despite the diplomatic nature of their mission. The screen flickered to show a Krell commander, a mantis-like being with compound eyes and razor-edged mandibles. Draconian vessel, you have entered Krell-claimed space. Identify yourselves and your purpose immediately. Captain Thorne started to respond, but Prince Kaiser stepped forward. I am Prince Kaiser of the Draconian Empire. We are on a humanitarian mission to rescue survivors from a damaged vessel. The Krell commander's antennae twitched in what Jack had learned was a sign of suspicion. A prince on a rescue mission? The Draconian Empire does not engage in such charity without purpose. All spacefaring civilizations have an obligation to respond to distress calls, Kaiser replied smoothly. Would the Krell Dominion do any less? A tense silence followed as the Krell commander appeared to consider this. Jack noticed Ward watching the exchange with intense interest, no doubt filing away every detail of this first contact between humans and Krell. The vessel you have interfered with was in violation of Krell space, the commander finally declared. By salvaging it, you claim responsibility for its transgressions. Jack stepped into view beside Kaiser. The vessel contained human survivors, members of my species. They were lost, not trespassing intentionally. The compound eyes of the Krell commander shifted to Jack, multifaceted surfaces gleaming. Humans, we have heard of your kind. A primitive species, newly emerged from your cradle world. Jack bit back a retort, remembering the diplomatic stakes. New to the galactic community, yes. Which is why we're grateful for the Draconian Empire's assistance, and why we hope the Krell Dominion will show similar wisdom and restraint. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Jack couldn't interpret. After a moment, the Krell spoke again. We will permit you to depart with the human survivors, but the derelict vessel is forfeit to the Dominion as compensation for the violation of our space. Captain Thorne looked to Prince Kaiser, who gave a slight nod. Acceptable terms, the captain confirmed. We will withdraw immediately. The transmission ended, and collective tension on the bridge eased slightly. Ward approached Jack with newfound respect in his eyes. Nice negotiating, he said quietly. You've learned their ways well. Turns out most species respond better when you don't immediately try to establish strategic outposts on their borders, Jack replied pointedly. Ward had the grace to look slightly abashed. Touché. As the Ember's wing prepared to depart, Kaiser joined Jack at a viewport where he stood watching the Krell vessels approach the abandoned Pathfinder. They'll strip it for technology, the prince observed. Learn everything they can about human engineering. Jack shrugged. Let them. From what I gather, Earth technology has moved on considerably since I left. And maybe understanding humans better will make them less inclined to see us as threats. Is that what you've done with us? Kaiser asked suddenly. Made the Draconians understand humans better? Jack considered the question, turning to look at the young prince who had grown so much in such a short time. Maybe. Or maybe you've helped me understand what being human really means. Kaiser tilted his head curiously. Which is that we're at our best when we connect with others, even those who seem completely different from us, Jack said. That laughter matters as much as power. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up and be present for someone else. The prince nodded thoughtfully. Father says you've taught our court more about diplomacy than a dozen ambassadors. High praise from a guy who conquered 7-star systems, Jack chuckled. The journey back to Draken Prime was subdued. The human survivors recovered under draconian medical care, but Jack found himself avoiding extended conversations with them. Their Earth, a world 70 years beyond the one he'd left, felt like a place he no longer belonged. Will you go back with them? Kaiser asked on their final night aboard, the question that had been hanging unspoken between them finally given voice. Jack looked at the prince, the child who had once been feared throughout the palace, now respected and genuinely liked. The child he had come to care for deeply. No, he said simply. My life is in the Empire now. Besides, someone has to keep you in line. Kaiser's frills rose in relief, though he tried to maintain a dignified expression. A wise decision. Father would be most displeased if he had to find another human advisor. Can't have that, Jack agreed, smiling. The Ember's wing returned to Draken Prime to an understated but formal reception. Emperor Zorn himself was present to welcome them, along with a hastily assembled diplomatic contingent prepared to officially greet the human survivors, Earth's accidental first ambassadors to the Draconian Empire. As Dr. Reyes and Commander Ward stepped forward to meet the Emperor, Jack stood back with Prince Kaiser, content to observe rather than participate in the formal proceedings. Sullivan, the Emperor's voice cut through the diplomatic murmurs. Join us. Jack approached, bowing slightly as protocol demanded. Your Majesty? These humans speak highly of your intervention, the Emperor said. They say you bridged understanding between our species in a critical moment. Ward nodded. Mr. Sullivan's unique position gave us instant credibility with the Draconians and helped defuse the situation with the Krell. Earth owes him a debt. The initiative will want to debrief you thoroughly, Reyes added. Your experience living among the Draconians is invaluable. Jack glanced at Kaiser, whose expression remained carefully neutral, though Jack could read the tension in the prince's rigid posture. With respect, Jack said, turning back to face his fellow humans, my place is here. I'm happy to share what I've learned about Draconian culture, but I'll be doing it as the prince's advisor, not as an Earth representative. Ward frowned slightly. You understand what you're turning down? You'd be instrumental in shaping Earth's approach to interstellar relations. Maybe, Jack agreed. Or maybe what Earth really needs is someone who stays here, building a foundation of trust and friendship with one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Reyes studied him thoughtfully. You're proposing to be our unofficial ambassador. I'm proposing to keep doing what I'm already doing, Jack corrected. Helping a young prince understand that different doesn't mean threatening. That finding common ground, even something as simple as a yo-yo or a good laugh, can bridge the gap between worlds. Emperor Zorn's massive head inclined in what Jack had come to recognize as approval. A wise perspective and one that has already served both our peoples well. He turned to Ward and Reyes. The Draconian Empire extends an offer of formal diplomatic relations with Earth. When you return to your world, convey that we would welcome official representatives, though none could replace the unique position Sullivan has earned. The implications weren't lost on anyone present. Earth had just been offered alliance with an interstellar empire capable of protecting it from potential threats like the Krell. And Jack, the janitor who had simply treated a dragon prince like a person rather than a problem, had laid the groundwork for that alliance. In the days that followed, arrangements were made for the human survivors to return to Earth aboard a draconian diplomatic vessel, a gesture of goodwill that would demonstrate the Empire's technological capabilities while establishing peaceful contact. The night before their departure, Jack found himself on one of the palace's vast terraces, gazing up at the stars and contemplating the strange turn his life had taken. He'd left Earth seeking better opportunities than a struggling economy could offer, only to become the linchpin of humanity's first interstellar alliance. "Do you regret staying?" Prince Kaiser's voice came from behind him. The young Draconian moved to stand beside Jack at the terrace railing, his growing form now reaching Jack's shoulder. "Not for a second," Jack replied honestly, "though I'm still processing the whole 70 years have passed on Earth thing. That's going to take some getting used to." "Time is relative," Kaiser said, with the casual confidence of someone raised understanding interstellar physics. "What matters is where you choose to spend it." Jack smiled at the wisdom from his young charge. "When did you get so philosophical?" "I had a good teacher," the prince replied, his tail swishing in contentment. "One who taught me that sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected sources. Like a human with a mop. Like a friend who saw me when no one else would look past their fear," Kaiser corrected softly. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the twin moons of Draken Prime rise over the horizon. Jack thought about the path that had brought him here, the economic downturn that had pushed him off Earth, the series of odd jobs that had landed him in the Imperial Palace, the chance assignment that had placed him in the chambers of a tantrum-throwing dragon prince. "You know," he said finally, "back on Earth, there's an old saying. Everything happens for a reason. Do you believe that?" Kaiser asked. Jack considered the question, thinking of the thousands of decisions and coincidences that had led to this moment, standing beside a young alien prince who had become like family, on a world light years from his birthplace, having just helped forge humanity's first interstellar alliance. "I believe we make our own reasons," he answered. "We find meaning in the connections we build, the lives we touch. Everything else is just cosmic coincidence." "A very human perspective," Kaiser observed. "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" Jack asked with a raised eyebrow. The prince's mouth curved in a smile that showed just the tips of his fangs. "Definitely a compliment. After all, it was your human perspective that taught me to laugh instead of rage, to connect instead of intimidate." "You'd have figured it out eventually," Jack said. "Perhaps," Kaiser allowed, "but not before burning through many more caretakers." They shared a laugh at that, the human janitor and the dragon prince, their unlikely friendship now the cornerstone of an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. The following morning, Jack stood with the royal family as the human survivors prepared to board their transport. Dr. Reyes approached him one last time. "This is history in the making," she said, gesturing to the draconian vessel that would carry them home. "First official contact, first interstellar alliance for Earth. And it all started because you made a dragon prince laugh." Jack smiled. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest connections. As the Earth delegation departed, Emperor Zorn turned to Jack and his son. "The galaxy will be different after today. New alliances, new possibilities, perhaps new challenges as well. Whatever comes," Prince Kaiser said confidently, "we'll face it together, Draconians and humans." With a sense of humor, Jack added, pulling out his well-worn yo-yo and executing a perfect walk-the-dog maneuver that still delighted the prince. Emperor Zorn watched his son laugh, a sound once rare in the palace but now a regular occurrence, and nodded his massive head in satisfaction. Indeed, perhaps that is the greatest lesson in all this, that even the most fearsome empire can benefit from learning to laugh. Jack couldn't help but agree. From janitor to royal advisor to accidental diplomat, his journey had been unlikely at every turn. Yet here he stood, proof that sometimes the most powerful tool for change wasn't firepower or technology or even royal decree. Sometimes it was simply the ability to see past differences, to connect on a fundamental level, and to share a moment of joy across the stars. Later that day, as life in the Imperial Palace returned to its routine, Jack found himself back in Prince Kaiser's chambers, organizing a collection of artifacts the prince had gathered from various worlds, a hobby Jack had encouraged to channel the young Draconian's curiosity. "Jack," the prince said suddenly, looking up from a technical manual on Earth spacecraft he'd been devouring since meeting the survivors. "Do you think there are other janitors out there changing the galaxy one clean room at a time?" Jack laughed, setting down a peculiar crystalline object from the Andromeda sector. "I doubt it, but I like to think there are people everywhere finding unexpected ways to build bridges between different worlds. Like teaching a dragon prince to laugh?" Kaiser suggested with a glint in his golden eyes. "Exactly like that," Jack agreed. "Though I still maintain you had a sense of humor all along. It was just buried under royal expectations and about a ton of fire-breathing tantrums." Kaiser's frills flattened in mock offense. "I was expressing my draconian heritage in the traditional manner. By setting the ambassador's ceremonial headdress on fire? A cultural misunderstanding." The prince sniffed, then broke into a grin he couldn't suppress. As they bantered, Jack reflected on how far they'd both come. The feared prince now known for his diplomatic skills rather than his tantrums, and the human janitor now an advisor whose opinion was sought by emperors and Earth officials alike. Neither of them had changed completely. Kaiser was still unmistakably draconian, proud, occasionally temperamental, with a natural affinity for strategy and power. And Jack was still the practical, straightforward human who preferred solving problems with common sense over protocol. But together, they had created something new, a friendship that transcended species, that balanced strength with humor, tradition with innovation. A friendship that had already changed one empire and was poised to influence human history as well. "I've been thinking," Kaiser said, setting aside his manual. "When I eventually become emperor, I want things to be different." "Different how?" Jack asked. "More connections between worlds. Less conquest, more alliance." The prince's expression turned earnest. "Father built an empire through strength and fear. I want to build something greater through understanding and respect." Jack felt a surge of pride at the vision taking shape in this young mind, a vision he had helped nurture. "That sounds like a future worth working toward. You'll help me?" Kaiser asked, a rare vulnerability in his voice. "Kid, I'm not going anywhere," Jack promised. "Someone's got to keep the future emperor's quarters clean, right?" The prince's laughter echoed through the chamber, no longer the isolated room of a feared royal child, but the warm heart of a new beginning for two species and perhaps, eventually, an entire galaxy. In the years that followed, Jack Sullivan would witness the formalization of the Earth-Draconian alliance, the gradual transformation of the Draconian Empire under Emperor Zorn's evolving leadership, and the continued growth of Prince Kaiser into a diplomatic force in his own right. Earth would send official ambassadors, build embassies, establish trade routes. But none would ever quite replace the unique role of the human janitor who had first bridged the gap between worlds with nothing more than a mop, a yo-yo, and the simple wisdom that sometimes the best way to handle a difficult situation was to make someone laugh. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.